Anthony Catholic. He is the international affairs supervisor in the Garden of Hope in Taiwan.
Thank you very much. I'm British, but I live in Taiwan. I've lived there for a long time. And I speak some Chinese as well. Following from what Bandana said, the Garden of Hope actually started also around at the same time, 26 years ago in Taiwan. And we started not with advocacy, but with a shelter. We started with a halfway home for indigenous girls who were trafficked from the cities, trafficked from the mountains in Taiwan to the cities. But that, we went through the same kind of process, from service to advocacy to service. Through our service work, we found there was a need for legislation and against child prostitution in Taiwan. And then through that, we discovered there was a need for services for young girls. Young girls and women in Taiwan needed to be protected. And from that, we campaigned for domestic violence law, and we opened up shelters. And so advocacy and our service work have gone hand in hand together. And so we're very much part of that movement in Asia and in Taiwan. And we're also proud to be the secretariat of the Asian network of women's shelters. And there's information about us on the back of your flyer. And there's more information about the global network of women's shelters. So I'd encourage you to get involved with us and join our organization if you can. Okay, so moving very quickly on to my presentation. Part of our work in the Garden of Hope, we found that there is a need for follow-up service after women come to our shelters. We found that around about 50% of women who come to Garden of Hope shelters then come back again within 6 months, because they're unable to leave the violent environment for some of the reasons that Bandana mentioned. We also suffer from those in Taiwan. Taiwan's an Asian country. So women are forced to go back to the home through economic reasons and cultural reasons, pressure from their family, and then they go back to their home and back to their partner, and then after 6 months they're beaten again and they come back to our shelters. So we looked at this problem. We thought, what can we do to stop this cycle of violence? What services can we offer women so that they don't have to they have other choices? And for this they need jobs, and for this they need housing, and they also need the emotional support, and they need community support. They need a network of friends outside their partner's family, which can support them. And so this is something that we've been working on. We call this project Going the Second Mile. So my presentation today will be talking about the general situation of violence against women, and the 2 stages of domestic violence recovery, which is from crisis to rebuilding, and then the needs of domestic violence, victims of domestic violence today. So you all know about the problems of domestic violence. The UN says that 1 in 3 women are subjected to violence. Violence costs the US $8 billion a year, and in Taiwan, almost 70,000 women and children called in to a helpline, government helpline, because they were suffering from violence at home. And Taiwan's budget on domestic violence is around $13 million a year. So there are 2 stages to recovery. The first stage is the crisis stage, where women need, they call the police, they might need hospital treatments, they might need immediate shelter, so that they can escape from that violent environment. But after that, what happens? Well, after that, they'll need to get housing, they'll need counselling, they'll need career support, childcare, they'll need a social network to support them. So the rebuilding stage can be 6 times as long as the crisis stage. Usually women who come to our shelters will stay for 3 months to 6 months, at the most 1 year. But then after that, after they leave, they have to go through a period that's 6 times longer. So if they stay in our shelter for 1 year, they'll have to, the recovery period will take around 6 years. But when you look at government spending in Taiwan, the majority of funding, about $13 million US, goes on the crisis stage, goes on shelter services, goes on hospitals, goes on police services, and other services for women in that immediate crisis period after the immediate act of violence. But where the money is actually needed, where the time is actually needed, much less resources are allocated by the government. And the proportion is about 3 to 1. Okay, so look at the next slide. Now, what kind of services do they need? Breaking it down into roughly 2 kinds, women will need rent and childcare at a proportion of about 7 to 1 as well. So for the 70,000 cases in Taiwan that were reported last year, we estimate that they need around 80 million US dollars. And this will provide very basic $1,000 US a year for rent and around 140 US dollars for childcare. So very, very basic funding, not enough to pay full rent. But in Taiwan, you could perhaps that would pay a third to a half of your rent. So not too bad. It will help them get back on their feet. This is what we're recommending. So if we can take a look at the next slide. But of course, we know that the number of cases of domestic violence that are reported compared to the numbers that are actually there, there's a great difference. So there could be 10 times as many actual cases of domestic violence beyond the 70,000 that are actually reported. So we need 10 times as much money, which would take us up to 800 million US dollars. But the government spending, that one quarter of the 13 million US dollars that the government spends on domestic violence is around 3 million US dollars, and that compared to the 80 million that's actually needed, you can see there's a great gap there. Now, is this too much? We're asking for 800 million US dollars or 80 million for the reported cases. Is that too much? Well, no, it's not, because the government spends 10 billion on national defense in an attempt to defend itself from outside attackers, and 37 billion US dollars is spent on the 4th nuclear power plant in Taiwan, which most people are totally against and is going to be a complete waste of money. So Taiwan has enough money to do this. This is an epidemic. Domestic violence is an epidemic. It gets to it rots the heart of society. It breaks up families. It's a terrible cost to society. But the government allocates very few resources to it. Now, would it be money down the drain? Would it be wasted money? Well, no, because if you invest in women, then you invest in whole families. If you help women get back on their feet, if you help them, give them the skills that they need to find jobs, if you help them give them the skills to find, give them the needs to find housing and the social network resources that they need, then actually they can become useful contributors to society and the economy as well. So we estimate that if you invest just 2,000 into a survivor of domestic violence, it could create a social value of 20,000 US dollars. So you're actually making money. Now, in the Garden of Hope we serviced, again, the numbers are not huge. As Bandana hinted, we have, although we have 20 shelters in Taiwan, we serve around 1,000 women every year, and out of those 1,000, we have around 240 in our employment service. And the employment service is, like I said, we have semi-sheltered factories, we have a chocolate factory, we have a biscuit factory, and we also have some second-hand stores, and we have a hostel in the east coast of Taiwan. And these, apart from making a small amount of money for the organisation, the main point of these workplaces is to give women some experience of working in a real working environment and help them get used to, help them build a career. So we have 240 women who are in these programs, and we have an 80% success rate. So 80% of the women who come through our employment programs then go on to find jobs. So this is something that's very important. It's very closely connected. We're talking about the MDGs and what happens after 2015 at this conference here. And we're also talking about ending violence. and shelter services and going the second mile with women and providing those follow-up services so they don't have to go back to the violent environments and they don't get stuck in that cycle of violence. These are things that are not only help save lives and not only help rebuild families, but also things that help the economy and help sustainable development. And that's why it's so important that we continue to advocate for these things, as well as providing the services that women need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony. You know, we have to ask the government where the money put in the where, you know, like the money put to the nuclear and put in the so I think that we have to ask the government where is the money going. Okay.